Bree. I'm part of the event staff here, and we are now hosting in-person and virtual events along with supported and partnered events, trips, and classes. For a full list of everything that we're offering, please go to our website, politics-prose.com. Before we get started today, I'd like to ask you to please silence your cell phones so not to disrupt the event. And when we get to the time for opening the floor to your questions, the question mic is right here. And please line up at one of these mics and so that everyone can hear your question. We are both audio and video recording today's program so that you or anyone you know can find it at the Politics and Prose YouTube channel. After the Q&A, we'll have a signing up here at the table. So if you have not already purchased the book, we have many copies at the register at the front of the store. We will ask you to line up starting here at the pillar, and we'll come by to ask for your names if you guys want your books personalized. So please have your books ready for us. Once the event is complete, we ask that you fold up your chairs and lean them against something sturdy. So now, without further ado, I'm really excited to welcome Dr. Nyani Nkrumah. She was born in Boston and raised in Accra, Ghana, and Harare, Zimbabwe. Her love for writing comes from her mother, a teacher who entertained her children by reciting Shakespeare during car rides to school. She's a dual biology and Black Studies major at Amherst, has a master from the University of Michigan, a PhD from Cornell, and is a Fulbright scholar. She lives in the DC area with her husband and 2 children. Dr. Nkrumah will be joined in conversation with Lesli Foster. Lesli was a journalist advocate and first informer in the Washington, D.C. area for more than 2 decades. She works to inspire and make an impact through her work as a weeknight anchor at 5, 6, and 11 p.m., and also leads the station's Impact series that links WUSA 9 journalists with the community to solve problems. So please join me in welcoming to Politics and Prose Dr. Nyani Nkrumah and Lesli Foster.
Good evening.
Good evening, Leslie.
Let's see if this is where, is this thing on? It is on. Good evening. What an exciting night. I am so excited to be here with Nyani, to be able to talk about her incredible work. I know many of you already know about Nyani. You know about her brilliance. You know about the depth of her. And many of you are learning about this first book that she's written. It is magic. You all have copies of the book already. I read the copy that didn't have a cover. So when we walked in today, I said, oh, that's how it looks. This is so great. This is so great. So if you're just joining us and you don't know a ton about the book, let me just tell you a little bit. So Wade in the Water is a gripping novel about power and vulnerability and race and class, and it features a precocious Black girl named Ella and a mysterious white woman named Miss St. James. Now, as a journalist, it's not hard for me to think of questions to ask. Right. But when you're at a book talk and you're not supposed to give away the book,
Yeah.
we're going to do our very best to keep it intriguing but not give away the book. So thank you all. I finished the book on Sunday, and I mentioned this to Nyani, and I specifically waited until we got close to this day to finish it because I wanted it fresh in my head. And the characters are still stirring in my soul. So for all of you who are just picking up the book and just getting ready to take a dive into this amazing narrative, be ready. Buckle up. Why don't we start, Nyani, with the genesis of the characters in the book?
Okay.
How did they find you?
So just a quick recap, really just to go a few steps back and talk about writing before I get there. As they said in the beginning, I'm someone that loves writing, and I got writing from my parents, well, especially from my mother. My mother is a literature and language teacher. And all through our lives, I mean, our house was full of bookshelves and books. So I'd say the love of writing came from seeing this and from actually hearing her speak about Shakespeare. She had the rhythm of the language, and she spoke, I mean, we learned about Julius Caesar, we learned about, the Merchant of Venice, poetry. So that was an integral part of my growing up. But then because I loved books, I'm going to mention 2 books that were really instrumental in actually developing this book and the characters. So the first everybody knows about is Maya Angelou. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. And it was really my the first book as a child that I looked, that had a first person point of view. And that was Little Maya.
Yeah.
And the book just grabbed you and you went right into the character. I mean, she had a pretty traumatic life. But just using that first person point of view was, extremely compelling. So I would say she was one of my inspirations. And then the second is Catherine Cookson. Probably a lot of you haven't heard of her. Catherine Cookson is a British writer. She's written probably about 100 books. She's long deceased, but she really focused on, centering her books in the northeast part of London. It's a very poor, deprived area. And what I really grabbed from her was the character development. She had really deep, deep characters. And what I decided that I wanted to do was to make sure that my characters for Ella and Miss St. James were developed very, very deeply. So that is where the genesis of the characters came from. And that's why, spend a lot of time in the book actually developing their characters so the reader actually knows who they are.
I found myself reading the book and thinking to myself, I wonder if this is what they look like. I wonder if this is what they sound like, which is the mark of someone who's created a really great narrative. And I can tell that you've spent a lot of time working on that.
Right.
I wonder, because you and I said, we talked about the title of the book and how it changed and how this was not the original title that you came up with.
Right.
So how did you get to Wade in the Water?
Well, we talked about it. I won't tell you what the other title was, but we talked about it and we wanted something lyrical. And then I was listening to Eva Cassidy, and she was singing Wade in the Water. And so I looked up Wade in the Water, and obviously I knew it's a Black spiritual, but what I didn't know was that it was written way long ago in 1901, and it was really a call to slaves that were escaping on the Underground Railroad to say, get in the water, lose your scent, because the slave catchers are coming. And I really valued, that sense of it. And then also I loved the term, God's gonna trouble the waters. And the way I saw it is, in a way, this book is troubling the waters, is bringing up stuff. Ella uses a phrase in the book, which is, Miss St. James' arrival into town was stirring the pot, dredging up things that people wanted to be kept at the bottom of the pot. So I was also looking at this, as troubling the waters. I know it has another sense, it has a spiritual sense, as well. So that was the genesis of Wade in the Water.
I like how you talk about Ella and this troubling the waters narrative, because Miss St. James does truly trouble the waters, and you'll be able to tell that from the first pages that you learn about her, or you'll certainly learn about her background and why she's in this fictional town of Ricksville, Mississippi. So why did you choose Ella? Why did you choose to make your central character a child in this book?
Well, I mean, for two reasons I chose Ellen. One of the first reasons is that she is a Black girl, of course, and then the voice of a child is very nice, it's very innocent, and authors use that a lot. I mean, if you think of Room, there's the voice of a child, and when you're dealing with topics that are a little bit sensitive, first of all, it brings down the temperature in the room, and the second thing is you can really hear the voice of the child asking very innocent questions, and that helps the adult. If it was an adult arrives in the room with lots of baggage. Ella doesn't have any baggage. She's just looking at Miss St. James as Miss, this lady who has come into town. And I'll give you an example of this. So Ella says, she meets Miss St. James and she says, she's nice. Should I like her or should I not? And there's a lot behind that that comment. She's drawn to her on one, in one hand, but then there's the weight of the community that is, suspicious of Catherine St. James. So that is pulling and dragging at her. So she has this, innocent, should I like her or should I not? I mean, she does like her. So that's, where it starts.
She goes to great lengths with this friendship
She
and
does.
puts a lot at risk
Yeah.
She risks her connection with family. She risks her connection with friends. She risks upsetting the world order
Yeah.
at that point. And it sounds like you're giving her the kind of agency that she wouldn't have actually had back in that time period.
Well, this is the 1980s, so it's not the 1960s. So, and when you look at Ella's background and the family she came from, it explains why she was so drawn. I don't want to tell you, the whole story.
This is so hard because I'm like, but can we? No, we can't do that.
But when you know the details of her family, her mother, her father, and the type of characters they are, you realize why she is so drawn to Miss St. James. And yes, maybe it wouldn't have happened the way it happened, but because of that family subtext, you did get her drawn into Miss St. James.
You could have chosen any part of the United States or really the world to frame this story. Why did you choose a fictional town in the South to center these pretty deep discussions in a lot of ways around race and class and vulnerability?
Yeah. I chose Mississippi because of the history. The book looks at the 1960s in flashbacks. So most of the novel takes place in the 1980s, but then there are flashbacks to the 1960s. And what I wanted to show was the story of the civil rights issues in the 1960s. And it's a very it's a period in America's history that is very brutal, and I wanted to show that side of the story and see how far the characters have come now in the 1980s. And Mississippi, of course, there were so many things going on in Mississippi. We know Emmett Till, we know the Freedom Summer, we know all the issues of the voting, the trying to get voting rights. So it seemed to me a place that, held everything I wanted in a town. And I also centered Ricksville. There's particular towns in Mississippi that I actually visited, and I modeled Ricksville, as one of those towns and put it on the banks of the Mississippi, one of the Mississippi tributaries. Yeah.
So you obviously have the lived experience of being a black woman and a black child, having grown into a black woman.
Yeah.
But as far as I know, you haven't had the experience of being a white woman.
Right.
And so I'm wondering how you researched that role. How did you write the role of Miss St. James?
Okay. I'm somebody that actually just believes there's no generic person. So there's no generic white person and there's no generic black person. So what I did was, to try to find out who she was. And actually, I got it wrong the first time.
How did you know that?
Well, because I was told, I wrote a manuscript. I wrote a manuscript and it was pretty complete. And I sent it out, to agents and I sent it to readers. And the feedback I got, everybody was saying, we don't understand Catherine St. James. Where does she come from? Like, what is she about? And I realized I had to go back and decide, what was her backstory. And to get a handle of it, you have to really go into her childhood to understand her, because I realized that, you're simplest. You're at your simplest as as a child. And even if you go to a psychologist's office or whatever, they will tell you, I haven't been to the psychologist's office, but if you go, the first thing they're going to tell you is, what was your childhood like? And so what that did is that it made me decide to go back to when she was 5, when she was 6. And so in the novel, you have snapshots of her from the age of 5 to about the age of 18. So you get a really good sense of, her family history, the trauma she went through. And there are some parallels to what, Ella has gone through. And you get a real good sense of her family history. And because of that, you're able to see the person that she becomes.
I can see why the two of them find community with each other,
Right.
because in some ways they're both running from who they are and from whom they come from.
Right.
So they find each other, and there is that intersection.
Yeah.
but you can tell that one of them is coming to the relationship with more innocent intentions than the other.
Yeah, yeah, that is true.
How do you explore that a little bit without giving away what ultimately happens?
Very difficult. Very difficult to. I would say read the book. I think what I do is I really explore all the dimensions of their relationship, and so they are really strong, good parts of their relationship, and there are other parts of their relationship where Ella is pushing her, and pushing her in directions she doesn't want to be in. So it's this intricate dance, as you would, and I'll leave it at that.
You're gonna leave the dance there, huh?
Yeah.
So you told me that unlike a lot of writers, you wrote this book like a knitter.
Yeah.
You picked it up, you put it down, you picked it up, you put it down, and this went on for years.
Yeah.
For years.
Yeah.
How did you know when it was time to come back to that narrative, and how did it form itself after all those spaces and togetherness?
Well, I have a full-time job, and I think some of my work people are here, and it takes up a lot of time. I travel a lot. I have a family, and so writing is a hobby for me, and it's something that I love doing, but I don't often have the time. So what I did, as I said, is I do line by line, or I write a paragraph, or I write 2 pages, and then I leave it, maybe sometimes for a month or 2 till I have the time, and I go back to it. And what it does for me is I find that gives me distance. So whenever I get back to the book, it's actually seeing it with fresh eyes, and I can now edit it and decide where I want it to go. And that has actually been the process for the last, I would say, six or so years to get it to where, it's in the shape.
Who are they to you now? Are they part of your family, or are they like distant cousins? Are they people that you're going to visit from time to time? Or because I read it and I feel like they're still in me because I just finished the book and I'm still reconciling some things that you wrote about in the book.
Right.
But I wonder for you, since they came of you and through you, what do you do with them, and who are they to you now?
Well, I look at them as people that, I've worked with them for 6 years, so obviously they are like part of the family. And then what I also did was, because it's a first person point of view, I'm also trying, what it does is, as a reader, when you look at first person point of view, you're really sucked into the story because the person is telling you the story. And in this case, both Ella and Miss St. James are telling you the narrative. So you really get into their headspace and you begin to understand them. And for me, I'm also a writer, but I'm also a reader. So reading my own story, I am looking at it as a reader. So yeah, these are compelling characters that I think will remain with me for quite a while.
What do you want the people who read your book to take away from it?
Well, I would say probably about the first thing is that it's a fiction novel. And
so this is not based on they can't go do some research on these people
well,
and find out
no.
where you found them.
No. So, it's really, I put all the structures in place for a novel. That would be a compelling novel because I'm a reader at heart. I was part of this book group, and I love books that are compelling, that, turn pages, they have plot, they have, all these dimensions of deep characters, all these dimensions of what, constitutes a good novel. So that's on the first level. On the second level, of course, the novel explores these areas of race and class, and those are very integral to the novel because what I wanted to do was explore the intersection between race and society. And I wanted to, through this novel, look at, where do people come from? Like, what are their families' histories? And what legacies do they take with them from the past, into the future, and into their lives? And so when you look at the two characters, both Ella and Miss St. James, you see that there's a legacy of certain things, racism, colorism, you know, and these are very tough topics, and these are very deep topics. And the question is, are they issues that, you know, how do they contend with them within the book? And then into the future, for us as a reader, it's a very good thing to examine your own past and your own family dimensions, and, you know, and to find out, you know, where is my family history from? Am I tied to that family history? Can I break through? And that is the same question for Ella and Miss St. James. Their family histories, are they histories that tie them to the futures that they have, or can they break through those?
I think back on this town that you've created and the characters you've created and the challenges that they have. And in some ways, it could be cities or small towns in America today.
Yeah.
And so I wonder what they teach us about the experience they were having then for what we're kind of dealing with now.
Oh yeah, I mean, so I'll just
Around race.
around race. Yeah, certainly. You know, the book covers three periods really: the 1960s, flashbacks to the 1960s. It also covers obviously the 1980s, and you can see that from the 1960s to the 1980s, there has been a lot of change. And that's reflected in the book. So when you think of Nate, who's one of the characters in the book, certainly in the 1960s, he could not have walked into a mansion, a rich woman's mansion, she's white, and gone to visit her every day and walked into her through the doors as though he owned, you know, the mansion. But in the 1980s, you can see that in the book, this is possible. There's a friendship that develops in the book between Nate and Mrs. Cassidy, who is one of the women in the book. But you realize that even though in the 1980s they've come a long, you know, in the 20 years we've come very far, but clearly not far enough. And that is also reflected in the novel. Because Nate suddenly gets this inheritance from Mrs. Cassidy, and he's very worried about the inheritance, because what it means is that his life is in danger, because he suddenly inherited all this woman's wealth, and she has a family, and this plays out in the novel. And of course, when we think about today, 40 years later from the 1980s, we see how far Black people in America have come. You know, certainly representation is, you know, we look at Barack Obama, we look at Wes Moore, who's, you know, so certainly there has been progress, but clearly not enough progress. And when you look at, you know, the state of Black men in prisons, 5 times, you know, the number of white men, you realize that it is not because Black people are inherently more aggressive or more violent. You realize that these are, you know, historical legacy issues that are coming into play. Also the shooting of unarmed Black men. So these legacy issues, that is what the book is really about. What are these legacy issues? And how do they come to play in our day-to-day lives? How do they come to play in our friendships? And this is in the book, in the friendship that's developing between Ella and Miss St. James. Those legacy issues, what are the impacts of the legacy issues for generations to come? Because Ella is a very young person, and she hasn't actually experienced the 1960s, yet the legacy issues do come into play. So this is the deeper issues that the book discusses.
How have the characters changed you?
Well, I would say that the characters may not have changed me in particular, but certainly they've changed the way I develop the work in terms of the novel, in terms of developing the novel. Because what I found is that I've become a lot more detail-oriented. I didn't realize actually how much research I had to do. Because when I started out, of course, you know you're going to do research, but there's 2 types of research. One, the historical research. have to go to museums, you have to understand, the dynamics of the civil rights. You have to understand the 1940s, because Miss St. James is doing some research on the 1940s, which is actually the black migration out of the South. So all these issues you have to research them. There's also farm economy, because she grew up on a farm. So these are some of the issues also, I had to research. On the geographical side, in terms of the placement of Ricksville, there was also a lot of research there. So I was saying that just getting those details correct involved a lot more research. So I would say that changed me. For my next novel, I certainly know what to do.
So will Ella make a comeback in your next novel, or are you making a clean break and starting with something completely different?
Oh, no.
I have some thoughts. I have some thoughts. I wasn't ready for the book to end, and I was talking to Nyani over there, and I'm like, but maybe she could, and she goes, no, but then you'd have to, right? But that's the kind of book you want to read, where you have more questions and you want to learn more about the journey. And so it sounds like what's next for you is something completely different. Post Wade in the Water.
Completely different, yes.
Have you started to think about that already?
Not really. I'm just thinking right now that this, 6 years of a birth, you kind of want to take a breather. And then, but I am thinking, there's some thoughts, you have to reflect on whether you want to cover something social issue, what you want to cover.
What do you hope that we learn about relationships and moving past? I'm trying to be careful about the words, right, without giving you everything, but I think you have a general sense of kind of what we're talking about. There's a great deal of courage that has to take place on all sides to get beyond, you live here, I live here, you look there, I look like this, I believe this, you believe this. But it seems like there's a path for people to come together around differences in your book. Yeah. Even though I can't say it because I'll give it away. But the point is, I'm wondering how we might use what all of the people learn in your book to help us now to bridge some of the divides that we have.
You're quite right. I mean, when I wrote this book, I was looking also at this book as a way to, build a bridge. And there are certain points in the book where you can actually look at some of the characters. And each of the characters brings a different perspective and a different lens. So I guess what I can say at this point is Mr. Maccabee is a pretty central character in the book. And he is blind. He cannot see. And of course that means he cannot see color. And his role in the book is to bring that lens and that focus. And so you can hear in the book, what he feels about race and about color. And this is something I would like readers or book groups to be able to also discuss. Because the book, there are parts of it that are light and funny, and there are parts of it that are, deeper. And on the deeper level, certainly, I think it would be good to discuss, these bridges. And I used to belong to a very pretty diverse book club. And one thing we used to be able to do was to get together and dissect books. And it was really good to get different perspectives and different opinions. And I really think that this is how we move forward when we're talking about, heavy issues like race, heavy issues like colorism. Clearly there are work to do in those areas.
What were you doing when you were telling this story? What were you reading? What were you listening to? What were your interests? What got you through this? I know you talk about faith a good deal, and there is a great thread of faith through the book.
There is a thread of faith.
But I would think that every great writer has some additional inspiration beyond the books that you talked about. I wonder, in your everyday life, what were you doing that helped you build this narrative?
Well, I don't know whether I was doing anything particular. As he said, faith is pretty central in my life. And you can see that it is something that Ella she looks to a God that she sees in the sky, and he's helping her through, the trauma that she experiences. And then for me, it was just getting a writing community. I think it's very important if you're a writer to have a writing community. And the Bethesda Writers Center was was extremely helpful. They have all the classes you can imagine, and you get together with a whole group of aspiring authors, and they read your novel as well. I mean, I took so many classes, so that is something that kept me, glued to the writing community. I would also say that the book group that I belong to, there's one I belong to at my work, and we read different types of books. And then the book group that I had before was also instrumental, because once you keep reading, you have the urge to write, at least for me. As I read, I wanted to write. And so that was also very pivotal for me.
Well, I want to thank you for this first offering here, Wade in the Water. It is magical, it is gripping, it is heartbreaking, it is inspiring, all the things that you want when you spend time with characters that are well developed, with a plot that's beautiful. And so I know all of you have your own books, which is fantastic. And Nyani is going to sign those books for you. But I wonder, before we get to that point, if we can just give her a round of applause for a beautiful first.
Thank you.
A beautiful first.
Thank you.
I know as a writer, this makes you a little uncomfortable, right? The talking about the writing. But I want you to get comfortable, because I hope so many people read your book and continue to read your book, because it really, really is a great, great offering. It could just totally lose myself in the book. And that's
Wonderful.
what
Thank
you
you.
love
Thank you.
about great authors and great stories. I bet there are many other great questions here in the audience that I haven't thought of. And if they ask you the wrong question, you can't blame me, because I'm not, they're not the journalist, but they have, I'm sure, great, insightful questions. So I think there is an opportunity for us to have people come up to the mic if you'd like, if you have some questions for Nyani about the preparation for the book itself, any of the characters. If you're an aspiring writer yourself and you have some questions, I'm sure she would be happy to give you some advice.
Great.
Hi there.
Hi. So Nyani and I, our sons are seniors in high school together, and I'm very excited to read the book. And I'm wondering, for our boys as seniors in high school, is this an adult book? Is it something for young adults? What age group do you think would appreciate it the most, and what group is maybe too young to read the book?
Okay. I normally say high schoolers and above. It's an adult novel. There are some themes of, abuse. So kids that are younger than high school, I probably wouldn't recommend it, but anyone above high school.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you again for your time and showing up here and discussing with us. I did have a question. So you mentioned in developing Miss St. James' character that the first time you did the manuscript, you got it wrong. So I wonder, in writing and throughout the entire process, how did you balance your intended vision with the feedback that you got from some of the people who actually reviewed prior to your publication?
Great question. Thank you. I think when you're a writer, you have to decide how to accept feedback and which feedback to accept and which to say, no, it's not my vision for Miss St. James. And for me, with Miss St. James, because so many people were saying the same thing, I realized that this was something that I had to go back and take a look at, because she's a very central part of the book. And if people were not getting who she was, that was a big, kind of flaw you have to go back and fix. But on other minor things, sometimes I push back and I say, this is my vision. This is my vision for Ella, for example. And, you know, I can't compromise that. But yeah, so.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Hello, everyone. I'm a friend of the family. I'm just here to say congratulations. Fantastic work.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm standing in the back next to David. Yewande says hello.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
See, now, don't you feel better now? You feel better.
Right, this is great. Hi.
So hi, I know you as Nyani
Yes.
from Ghana,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So your mother was, of course, my English teacher in Ghana.
Yes, yes, so you heard me praise her.
Yeah,
I hope she
exactly.
listens to that.
So the question I had was, I was just curious to know, did you share the book with her, the drafts with her, and did she help you with anything? Just
well,
curious.
actually, I did share the drafts with her, but really it was my sister Mansa who actually read and gave me feedback. But I did share some drafts with her, as you know, because it's taken so long. Yeah, she has read the book, and of course she gives amazing feedback. I'm sure. So my mother was the English teacher and language teacher for an international school in Ghana. So Lakshmi was at the international school. Yeah.
Oh, give her my love.
Okay.
Can you talk a little bit about the process of getting the book published?
Okay.
Because you hear so much about people who have all these different drafts, so I'm interested in your journey in terms of getting it published.
Yes, okay, that is a good question. So in terms of getting it published, once you finish the actual novel, there's a difficult process of getting an agent. And that is actually where I think a lot of people get stuck. You have to send out these query letters which explain what the book is all about. It has to be compelling enough for an agent to be able to pick it up and say, you know, I'm interested in this. And I went through I went to a conference which helped me develop the query letter. And then I started sending out to agents. And that process took a while, you know, because agents will say, well, I want to read, you know, a chapter here. And you send it to them, and then it takes a while to come back. And, you know, so I would say back and forth, it took about 8 months. And then I got an agent who is absolutely phenomenal. And she called me up and she said, I love your book. And let's work together on it. And she really has been instrumental in helping me develop it, because she actually is the type of agent that works with you, you know, to give you feedback, to, you know, allow you an opportunity to work on the novel. And that was a process that we went through. So I would say in all, the process took, you know, after I got the agent, the publication process takes a year. So once you get the agent now goes to the publisher. Once she's happy with the book, she goes to the different publishers and says, well, I have this book. And then once they say they want the book, it takes about a year. So it's a long process after you finish the book. So I've been working with the publisher for the last year. Yeah.
Hi, thank you also for being here. I'm in my literature course this morning. We were talking about the difficulty of publication, getting published, but also about how it takes away from the art of writing because your goal is only to get published instead of doing it as a hobby, as you said that it was for you. So can you talk a little bit about how you balance that?
Okay. Well, I didn't actually think really of the publication process till I'd finished the novel. And I think that's a good thing for me because I really just focused on the writing. And I'd advise people to do that because what you realize is that you have to produce the best work that you can possibly produce. And even when you think it's your best and it's not done, other people would say it's not done. And so I just focused on the writing till I got it right. There was a point at which I hired an editor to edit it, to just make sure it was in great shape before I sent it out. So that was my first point to do that. And then the whole rest of the marketing and the publishing and all of that came afterwards.
How did you react when you saw the cover of the book? Did you go, oh, it's real?
Yes. When I received the book, I mean, that was like celebration day. It's a beautiful cover. I'd already seen the cover, but to actually see it on the book makes a lot of difference. And it's a beautiful cover. So thanks to the artist who did that.
I know you as Yana, but also.
Yes.
First, I just want to say that there are a couple members of one of these book clubs that are here.
No, it's the DC
and
Ladies Book Club.
We're so proud of you. I remember you sending us a draft to read
Yes.
a long, long time ago.
Yeah.
So it's great to see this product here. So
Yeah.
congratulations.
Thank you.
As somebody who's a researcher, and I was listening to the process. So when you started this, like, did you have an outline and you said, I'm going to have these characters and this is what's going to happen? Like, did you outline it and then? No.
No. You know, the funny thing is I didn't outline anything. I just started with the character of Ella. I wanted a strong black character, a young girl. So that's who I started with. And I basically let the characters write themselves. And it sounds weird, but that's really what happened. So I just start writing about Ella and who she is. And then everything else she does, I don't plan. I just keep writing. And it's in the editing that I begin now to finesse the story and pull the story together. So it's really just, I didn't plan a single thing. It was only when I came to the end that I had to think, how do I bring all these elements together? And what is the message that I want to come through? And then again, it's in the editing that I managed to, carve out the story that became Wade in the Water. Yeah.
I see a gentleman and a sweet little girl who have on the most fabulous shirts. Have you seen this? Could you stand up for just a second? Yanni, I don't know if you've seen this, but you should. Wait, can you stand up so all of us can see you? Do you see that? Do you see what it says? Nyani Nkrumah Fan Club. Did you know you had a fan club?
That is amazing, guys.
That's called Start 'em Early.
Wow.
Start 'em
I want
early.
one of those shirts.
That's fantastic. You didn't know you had a fan club? This is brand spanking. This is news to you? This is breaking news to you?
Wow. No, I know them. This is my Bible study.
Oh, how wonderful.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So, in some ways, your book is bringing people together.
Yes.
That was the point, right?
That is the point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what's next?
So in terms of what's next, I think I'm just going to absorb this moment and enjoy the process. It's taken a while, and after that, I'm going to see, what's next. But I really want to thank all the friends and family and everybody that came out. It means a lot to me, and also to Politics and Prose in particular, because we used to live just down the street. We lived on Nebraska Avenue, and this is essentially where my kids grew up. So for me to be able to be here and talk to everybody is actually like a dream come true. So I also want to thank Politics and Prose for hosting this. Yeah.
Fantastic. Can we also shout out your wonderful family? I see your husband standing in the back, and your kids are here too, because they've been part of the journey to 6 years. Your kids have grown up.
They've grown up, yeah.
Your characters stayed the same age, but your kids grew up, and your family grew.
And they've been hearing about this book and this character for years. So I'm very happy I finally delivered it.
Are there aspiring writers in the audience? I know there are probably a couple, but are there people now who think maybe I could do this, or you have some inspiration to write your own book? in the audience? I see a few nods. I see a mom pointing to a beautiful daughter over here too. So that's also the power of, you talked about representation matters, and you being here matters, right? So that people can see you and see what's possible.
Yeah, that is true. Very true.
Well, I don't want to hold you from getting these wonderful books signed by Nyani. So if there aren't any other questions, we can give her one more really robust round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.
The author of Wade in the Water, Nyani Nkrumah. With the best fan club ever, 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 ever.